Why We Rise.
Okay, here we
Hello,
go.
everybody. Vinny, take us home. Let us know who we have with us today on this incredible podcast.
Well, she's the reason I rose this morning. This is everybody. I want to welcome Dr. Shelby Lazarow. She is the clinical assistant professor of psychiatry and behavioral sciences at Stanford, and we're thrilled to have her. We found each other, and we love what she does. She's given us compliments of what we're trying to do, and I think you're all going to find her very, very insightful. She's done work with MS patients, and she's working with Parkinson's patients now. So, Shelby, you want to tell us a little bit about, your practice?
Yeah, of course. So I work in the neuropsychiatry clinic at Stanford. So I basically see people have different neurological conditions. So yeah, Parkinson's, MS, epilepsy, FND, all those things. And so I see people for therapy, group and individual and couples and things like that. And so I'm I'm a health psychologist. So it's kind of where psychology and medicine come together. And so my real interest is in, the mind and the body, the fact that they're not separate and that working on one enhances the other and kind of bringing that to people. Because I think sometimes we get very separated from that.
I think we're used to having that happen to us, and what I really like is you're blending them together because you recognize one of your statements that I loved is that the mind is the body. Mm-hmm. And that's really the area we want to explore today, because I keep telling my partner here that I think a lot of the reason for his progress is his attitude. He's very positive. That's why we rise. That's why we're doing this podcast to tell everybody who has any kind of, I like you say, neurological afflictions, and the people that are surrounding them. If you have a positive attitude, that's going to really help you in your battles.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Go ahead, James.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, that's. I have my notes here. And what's interesting is I don't want to say there's a disconnect, because your background, especially within the study of neurology, you could have gone and been a neurologist. Like a practicing, rather than I think what you're practicing now. But, and if I said that wrong, forgive me. But what I've always found is that there seems to be not really truly a disconnect, but seeing how like the emotions that we go through affect or exacerbate the affliction, if you will. I find that even like now I'm super excited to do this interview with you. I've done this for a living for 30 years, sat across from major celebrities like yourself and interviewed people. And I get nervous, and I always got nervous, but now when I get nervous, it's this kind of nervous. Now, if I were to go sit on the couch for 15 minutes and turn on the TV and take my mind off of Parkinson's for a split second, I'd be still.
Yeah. And
be taking the same amount of medication, the same amount of everything, kind of doing the same kind of thing every day. So how do you, let me back up. What tools do you give your people with Parkinson's to help them understand that, well, this could maybe be enhanced by the fact that I have anxiety? Because I know what a psychiatrist will give you. I've got a couple bottles behind me, but the thing is, the psychology and giving person the tools to practice it every minute of every day. Talk a little bit about that, if you don't mind.
Yeah, well, I think kind of what you're highlighting even is just the process of going through how much things change. So you spend your whole life figuring out how to cope with things. So you have this career, you know how to be nervous, but still show up. And then all of a sudden your body starts doing something so different in response to stress. So there are ways in which to cope, but there's also kind of understanding and accepting that, okay, things are different now. Because I think, like you're saying, you're trying to be thoughtful about, okay, now I have to do this, and I want some tools and ways in which to bring this down. I think people also go through a process of kind of fighting that reality and actually making more stress and tension in their bodies and making things worse. And so I think the first piece is kind of accepting that it's different, and then being on board with something that's really challenging, which is kind of revamping how you cope with things. So a piece of that, I know we talked last time about mindfulness. That's a thing that I'm very interested in and teach a lot. And it's really bringing the awareness to kind of understanding, I can give you lots of tools of how to bring down anxiety, but it's starting to also apply them to yourself and then play around with, oh, when I do this, I'm starting to notice that it actually happens like this. And so there's a lot of ways in which we just very automatically deal with stress. And so it's kind of starting from scratch in a way of, now my body does this, and now I have to do this and rely on things in different ways. And also, taking accountability of that we can do a lot, that it's not only about kind of numbing things with meds, that there are a lot of things we can kind of take into our own hands. But I think that doesn't always feel very accessible. And I think you're kind of demonstrating that you can do both and that you do have a hand in, there are a lot of things we can do. It's just not so easy to understand what that is right away.
I think the interesting thing, first of all, I love the fact that you said can. That is one of my mantras. I profess that everywhere I go. It's not, it's not my original idea, but I like to say to people, focus on what you can do versus what you can't do. And like, I now am sort of at a phase where at the end of my days, well, hang on, not the end of my days, but the end of my day, I will get, a little shuffly, a little folly downy, if you will. It's not really a term, but we'll see if we can put it on a t-shirt and make some money off of it. But what is interesting is I noticed that I was focused on getting this thing set up. I wanted to make sure at this point in time in the interview, I'm still noticing the red light blinking for recording. I'm assuming we're recording. But what's interesting is that I do these things and sometimes I go, again, living in the moment, not worrying about the past and the future, just staying here in the present in this moment. I could stay here forever because I love these people that are on the screen with me and I enjoy the pontificating, if you will, on my side. But about 2 minutes before I was going to log on to you guys, I said, I better go to the bathroom because sometimes in the morning, the medicine tends to make me go to the bathroom more than I would normally go. Too much information, but I'm sharing. So what I found is I hopped up out of the chair and skipped ran to the bathroom in my little apartment, where at 5 o'clock tonight, I tried to do that. I'd be shuffling. I'd go head over heels, bang into something, bruise my arm, swollen finger, whatever it may be. So I honestly believe that there is a methodology to thinking that you can do this stuff and paying attention in the moment when it actually shows you that you still can do this. But I think most of us write it off because we're flooded with negative feedback. How do you help people combat that? Or how do you help people? How do you advise them?
Yeah. Well, I think what's really important about what you're saying is you're being really aware of, what happens for your body, how it changes over time. And it kind of goes to what I was saying about that idea of acceptance. And acceptance is, I think we touched on this last time. It's not resignation. It's not accepting and then putting your hands up and not trying anything. But if you can't kind of understand where you're starting from, you can't push those limits. You kind of have to be aware. So you have to be aware that in the morning you have this ability and at night it changes for you so that you can start pushing those limits and understand how to work within them. And if in the evening, there is a shuffle and there is a fall, it's kind of how do you cope with that? How do you also then, work to support yourself in that not happening in that way, but also, it's a really challenging thing to have happen, to have this ability in the morning and have something so totally different in the evening, but being able to kind of acknowledge the difference and work from there, be able to push these limits. And if you're very present and very aware, you're able to actually hear when the limits can be pushed and can't. And I think sometimes it's a little bit about respecting those and kind of making peace with them too.
Yeah, people use the term surrender, which to me, egotistically, being a competitive sports kind of guy and majoring in wiffle ball in college, Vinny will get that joke. I wouldn't say I was like uber athletic, but I played a lot of softball, which many people will say is drinking a beer from like first base to second base to third base. It's not really athletic either. I'm sure somebody who swims for their exercise goes, yeah, that's really great. You keep throwing the wiffle ball, bud. You're going to go places. And now, had I known this then, I could be on a professional wiffle ball tour, but I can't throw the ball anymore. I don't have the same ability to make it curve and do the things I used to do like in my sleep. And that's just one thing that I noticed that I did a lot of. I love to play wiffle ball. I would pick up a game anywhere, or softball, or even baseball. And the idea now of the fear, I think it's like once, how do I put this? Like, thoughts enter your mind. I mean, I think that I don't know how you'll feel about this, doctor, but people say that you have about 60,000 thoughts a day, but you only get like 10% of them coherently. Like, there's all kinds of things going on in the brain. And what I found is that sometimes the thought will come in and you go, well, why? Like, I used to joke until this thing, but I was like a hypochondriac. So like if Vinny and I were sitting in a bar and some guy walked by and he had like, tuberculosis or something, I'd be like, I think I got that.
Yeah.
It's like when it's like when the TV commercials come on and they go, do you sleep at night? Do you like to walk into the kitchen? You might have mesothelioma. I mean, it's just so broad. It's like, oh yeah, I've got mesothelioma. But what's interesting is that now when the thought comes in, it's more like, wow, you can't throw a wiffle ball anymore. You can't throw a softball anymore. And 5 minutes ago, I didn't have that thought. Then the thought comes in, and it's like, if you address the thought in the moment, you can sometimes push it away. But I think when you're a person that might be diminished in your physical abilities or even your cognitive abilities, it has a bigger impact. How do you present a tool for folks to and I'm leading up to the incredible tool package that you have available for people. But I mean, these are the things that I think medical doctors will say, exercise. But I think a psychologist will say, let's manage your anxiety, because that's doing as much damage, if not more, than not exercising, if you will.
Well, Cam, I want to jump in here. I mean, the doctor said a couple of things. I really love that acceptance is not surrender, but it's accepting whatever your limitations may be, and mindfulness. Very, very important to live in the moment. And I think, Jam, I think you live walking a very tight line, but I think you do it very well because, like the doctor said, you have to know what your limitations are, but at the same time, you and I talk about this all the time, Jim. We can't worry about tomorrow. We got to stay in the moment. So, you just following, and then you have that positive thing we saying, I can do this, I can do that. And it's one of the reasons we started this podcast, Doc, because I think Jim's one of the most positive people I know, and he's fighting every day. And he does it with a smile. And yeah, of course, sometimes he gets frustrated. But, if there is any other tool you can tell him, that I think you said it very well already, that your limitations at night. So you don't try to run at night, but you just ran today. And that's great that you did that. And I agree with you about medical doctors. I think Dr. Lazarow is really painting a great picture of the near future, because I have noticed my doctor asks me how I'm doing now instead of what are you here for? How are you doing? What's been going on? How's the job? How's home life? How's this? He starts that way. And, it was 10 years ago, that wasn't the case, So I don't know if it had to do with COVID and everybody emotionally messed up, but I do think, Doc, that doctors are actually leaning that way, at least accepting that, everybody has stress. So let's find out where yours is.
Yeah, it's interesting you point that out, because at one point I was training residents for primary care physicians. And that was a newer program of having a psychologist sit with them as how to talk to people, how to kind of shift the way we're confronting people, interacting. So that's so interesting that you've taken that shift.
And it's so necessary, because most of the time that was what was going on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I got my therapist business card from a medical doctor. You're sitting here again and there's nothing physically wrong with you. Will you call this one?
Yeah. Well, and to your point, when you're both talking about being in the present, and I do think the exercise piece, the how we eat, how we sleep, I think those are all in there with it. And I think the whole point of being in the present and aware is to be aware of those things too. I feel like the being aware in the moment is to be able to take in all of those things and really kind of be accountable for how to actually take care of yourself in the moment. So it's, you like you're touching on, a lot of times we're kind of worrying about the future, rehashing the past, and the amount of time that we're actually in the present can be so minimal. And then we're really missing what's actually happening in the moment. And so we're not actually able to cope in the most adaptive ways because we're kind of operating from very automatic, habitual ways of dealing with things. And we're kind of doing the same thing over and over. And so the idea of cultivating this ability to be more in the present, I'd almost think of it as, or I like to think of it as, we live in this really, fast-paced, technology-filled world. And it really wasn't that long ago that we were hunter-gatherers, and we're still kind of operating with that software. You know what I mean? So, there's a way in which we have these ways of kind of fight, flight, freeze, ways of reacting that really served us when a saber-toothed tiger was maybe around the corner, but now we're reacting to emails that way or limitations of ours, and it's very automatic. So we kind of, why I bring up mindfulness so much, and I made a course on it, was because working especially with medical disorders and things that are so out of our hands and things that being in touch with our body is so important, to be able to kind of manually update our software and be able to retrain our brains to see thoughts as just that, as thoughts, and be able to have an inch of space to kind of let them go. Because to your point, JM, thoughts are always on. Our brains don't turn off. They make thoughts like our mouths make saliva. And the point of something like mindfulness or meditation is not to turn them off. It's to be in relation to them differently. So to be able to have more of a hand in every time we kind of catch ourselves off into the future and we can bring ourselves back into now, I think of it as a bicep curl for our brain. And we're slowly rewiring our brains to be more present and more able to make better decisions for ourselves. And I'm even thinking about when you're talking about being so, Vinny, you're commenting on him being so positive. I would even think of it, because I think that might even be intimidating for people to feel like I have to be positive or I have to force myself.
You're
I think
right.
sometimes it's also about being aware in the moment so that you can notice what makes it difficult to be positive, or what about this situation isn't working for me. So it's kind of bringing your awareness so that you can make a shift to maybe make it easier to show up that way. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm
I
sorry, Vin. Go ahead.
Um, I just want to tell the listeners, watchers, viewers, fans, what we're talking about also applies to the caregivers and the family and just anyone watching. I mean, we're focusing on Parkinson's here, but what you just said is very important, especially for the caregivers. Live in the moment, be mindful. Don't worry about tomorrow. We just got to get through today and all that stuff. So that's all I wanted to say. So everybody listen, it's not just Parkinson's patients, people with Parkinson's.
Well, let me just jump in there, because I think that one of the things you touched on, Vinny, thankfully, is one of the things I definitely wanted to talk to the doctor about is, and now I'm going to forget my train of thought. Oh, caregivers. I I think there's, again, this is just my observation, but I think there's two tiers. And somebody asked me the other day about, my wife, and my wife is amazing and in many ways. But she also doesn't suffer this fool lightly. And so she will basically let me have it if I need to have it. But I was sharing with a friend a moment that we had together. We were at Griffith Park. It was an idyllic situation. People were barbecuing and playing volleyball and wiffle ball and all kinds of great stuff. And I think I said something funny, or I said something coy or cute or whatever. And she kind of looked at me and kind of for a moment, a little quiver, and she said, "I'm gonna miss you when if you're not around anymore." And I just remember like the impact of that. It was like an anchor hitting the bottom of the ocean. And so I started to realize that I think there's two tiers to this. And a friend of ours shared with us, she's a doctor in New York City, and she said, as we get older, our friend base, our friendship, people, I mean, putting it bluntly, people pass away, or I mean, they're no longer living, but your circle of friends gets smaller and smaller and smaller as you get older and older and older. And she said, we really have to be active in trying to have as many friends as we possibly can as we get older, because the connection is important. And the thing I hate the most about this disease is it's isolating, because people don't like the way they look. You know, it's like this guy, and then the little kid over there is getting scared because she doesn't know why the old man is kind of jumping around. And so you as a patient, I walk into rooms and I'm just like, oh my God, everybody is staring at me. Oh God, I got to get the hell out of here. And then the only reason they might be staring at me is because their natural reaction for social cues is, hey, the door opened. Oh yes, who cares? So, you know, I mean, the interesting thing is your friends, my friends, Vinny at the top of the list, and Brett, and I'm going to go blank on everybody's name now, but Josh and Russell, and people that are, I mean, there's a laundry list of people that I can go through. Eric Heidemann, a fraternity brother of mine, we've been talking for 3 years. He started calling me before the pandemic, and then stayed in touch with me. Scott Devine, the same thing. I used to get a phone call every Tuesday from Scott Devine after my business went away, simply because they wanted to make sure I was okay. They wanted to make sure that I wasn't going to jump off a bridge or do something like that. Brad Kinney is a guy that calls me every week, if not 3 times a week. And he's a guy I've known since the 6th grade. So the idea of mining your friends, because your friends want to help, they just don't know how to. A caregiver at home, a child, a spouse, a parent, they're thrust into it. I mean, all of a sudden they wake up one day and their world is totally different, because me, has something different going on in his body or his mind. I mean, do you agree to the fact that, you know, there's kind of 2 tiers of caregiving? There's the immediate family, and then there's the friends. And I think the friends can really, if they would just listen to this, and I try to talk about this all the time, is realize that they don't know how powerful it is when they give me a phone call and they may be going, God, the Giants lost last night. They had the game in hand and the guy gave up a home run in the 9th inning. Because you're a Bay Area person, I use the Giants because we're former Bay Area people. But the thing is that, and I'm rambling, I apologize. But the thing is that I want friends to know that they don't have to minimize their interaction with a person with Parkinson's. We love the fact that you do call us, or that you send us an email or a text, or invite us out to lunch. We still eat, you know what I mean? And help us from going quicker into the isolation, which older folks do anyways. I mean, my mother-in-law is 84 years old, and God bless her, she's like, you know, by herself in this beautiful home that is just like, it represents the family, but she's going to have to move out because she's got people that are like, you know, half a mile away from her or whatever. It's kind of a very rural setting in Colorado. So it happens naturally, but I think Parkinson's puts the pedal to the metal.
Well, you know, you talk about isolated. I like the story you told again about being in the moment and then waking up, where I think we talked about this before, Doc. He's sitting in a restaurant, and he looks out the window and he sees a group of people like waiting for their Uber, and they're laughing and stuff. And JM says, why can't I do that? And I think your wife said, you are doing that because you were at dinner with a bunch of people. But in the moment, you thought about it and you go, gee, look at those guys having fun. Well, you were doing the same thing.
Yeah.
So,
and I think the blessing, before Shelby responds, is that in that moment, the other side of my head goes, I said, why can't I be normal like them? Why can't I go out and run on the boardwalk? And we were down in like Hermosa Beach or someplace like that. And again, I was with all my friends from high school, people that I've known since the 6th grade. So, and we were just having a good time. Everybody was drinking, and I'm like, I'll have one cocktail. That's all I can really do, or one beer, or one glass of wine. And when I said that, this voice, which was clearly my wife in my head, going, "What are you feeling sorry for yourself? What is normal, JM? I mean, I'm sure Dr. Lazarow, who has spent X amount of years studying the brain, what is normal? We're our own normals, and as long as we're not harming each other or ourselves, it's really a pretty good way to kind of go about life, because then you're in the moment constantly. If you're focusing on, this is normal, this is just another stage in my normalcy of life, and I can fight this all I want, and there are days that I do and curse it and fall apart. And there's days that I go, wow, I'm really blessed that I get to talk to you 2 guys. You know, so that's kind of where that story went, which is also on the website.
Yeah. Well, I first am really happy that you highlighted the part about connection and community. And that's kind of a whole section of the course that I made because I feel like it's so important. And I think you're highlighting, when you're saying, we want to eat too, call your friend, we want to hear from you. I also think it's a process for people of understanding how to kind of unravel themselves from the isolation, to kind of, there are ways in which we also kind of, like to your point, close off because of what it means and what we kind of tell ourselves about how we're making people feel. And sometimes it does take, you're hoping that people from the outside will help pull us out of it. And also there's a piece in which we kind of have to let them know how to help us or how to be in relation to us and what we want to talk about or don't. So I think it's so important what you're highlighting. I think for anyone, not just someone dealing with Parkinson's, I think community and connection is like such a huge part of life and being okay. But also what you're highlighting with, also the narratives we kind of tell ourselves. So, there's a way in which we have these stories that we tell ourselves and they kind of become true for us. And a whole piece of the bringing ourselves back to the present is being able to kind of notice that we do that and start being aware of these things that we say. Because like we said before, the thoughts are going to keep coming. I mean, maybe they'll get quieter, but they'll keep coming. We just get better at catching them more quickly and letting them go. And I think, oh, go ahead.
Do you believe in manifestation? And also, what are your thoughts on neuroplasticity?
Mm-hmm. Manifestation in that you kind of will something into being.
Right. Or in your case, like, we'll call it, I mean, I've gone through a lot of training and a lot of seminar type stuff where they talk about the brain and they talk about mindfulness and all kinds of stuff. And the idea that thoughts are neither good nor bad. They're just thoughts, but we put an emotional attachment to them. And that the average thought, I think, again, I'm not the scientist, so correct me absolutely where you can, is that, it's like 90 seconds, but I think we have a tendency, before it dissipates, we have a tendency to fixate on, especially something that seems out of the norm for us or traumatic or whatever it may be. Classic example, as you say goodbye to your kids, they get on an airplane, you go, oh my God, what happens if that plane go, and it's like, why would you even have that thought? You know what I mean? But it's just the brain going, hey, we're going to keep you safe. So we're going to keep you in the corner there, worrying about these things that don't exist. I think I quoted it the last time we talked, but Michael J. Fox uses a quote that is fantastic. And I don't think he takes claim to it, but he's a very powerful person in this world. Because he said, if you worry about something and it doesn't come to fruition, now you've wasted all that time. And he said, in the off chance that thing you're worrying about does come true, now you got to worry about it again. And so the idea of the simplest term, and my parents used to say this, we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. Well, that means right now they're in the moment. And nobody talked about being in the moment back then. It was just like, oh, it's a catchy phrase. So when we get to the bridge, then we'll cross it. I see what you're saying there. Can't cross the bridge if there's no bridge, right? And so the idea of these thoughts, this is really, because like, again, I think they all should get a hold of, and we'll put up a number of how to reach you or a web page on how to reach you for your wellness thing. But the idea that you can actually control your thoughts in a lot of cases by just staying focused on what you're doing. Focus is a huge factor, and it's even harder for a Parkinson's patient because that's one of the cognitive issues that gets disrupted is your ability to focus, your ability to sit still. And now I feel like I'm more preaching than I am asking, but I mean, what are your thoughts on
highlighted neuroplasticity? That piece that, so, for a long time, it was the belief that the brain kind of only degrades over time and we can't change our brains. And in reality, we can shift our brains both in structure and the way that they fire throughout our whole lifespan. And so this, when you're saying a kid gets on the plane and then we have this automatic thought about it, there are also ways in which we have these really well-worn grooves of patterns of thought or worry. And something like mindfulness, you can actually, the more you practice, catching that, and then bringing yourself back to, okay, that's a thought. I'm here. Here's my breath. Here's my body. I'm back in the now. You are training your brain to fire a different way. And so the more you practice, I mean, that's why things like this take a lot of practice, but you start wearing new grooves in your brain, or you can think of it as new like patterns of firing in your brain. So as long as you can kind of have patience around these thoughts are going to keep popping up. How do I get better at seeing it and knowing that's just a thought. That's not a fact. Oh, there's that thought again. I'm going to let go of it. You kind of get better and better at catching it more quickly and letting go of it more quickly, so that you're more in the reality, so you can kind of be aware of, oh, this actually isn't a threat. This isn't actually something to worry about. And you start seeing it show up in your life of just, you just are more present, you are more aware, and you're already starting to just respond differently to things.
Doc, can you explain what neuroplasticity is for everyone?
Mm-hmm. So it's their brain's ability to change and reshape itself in response to things you experience in your life, to your thoughts, to your environment. So all those things affect how your brain learns to function and fire.
Yeah, I got it. Yeah, which is what we're talking about.
Yeah, and so things like, I mean, something that, this is kind of the basis of why I have a course that I created. It's called Mindful Healing. It's an introduction to mindfulness course, and it's specifically for, it came out of my work with people that are dealing with medical conditions, but it specifically focuses on the body, health, healing, disease. And the reason I really did this was, mindfulness has been shown to actually physically change your brain. So the hardware of it, kind of being able to restructure it and even stop kind of age-related degeneration. So I found that fascinating. And also it's been shown to kind of change the way our software works. So it improves things like focus, cognition, so many different things, the way we deal with anxiety and stress, and just a whole bunch of things. And so the ability of using mindfulness to actually rewire your brain is kind of been shown in how our brains fire in research, and the structure, a little change in the brains. And that's been fascinating.
And that is great. Thank you. I'm so happy that's what you're working on, because I know I need that.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure, a lot of us do in the world that we're living in now, and we get all kinds of signals thrown at us and all kinds of information and disinformation, and all that does is stir up everything. So if you can stay in that moment, as you say, and if you can, teach yourself to be mindful and say, this is what's happening, this is where I am right now, it has an amazing calming effect. I wish I were better at it. It has a great calming effect.
Yeah. Well, you're even making me think of, a piece of this, like you guys have been talking about different tools, and there are things that, for example, with the course or when I work with someone, there are all these kind of concepts we can go through and exercises to practice and things like that. But I think something I feel really important about mindfulness, or teaching yourself to be in the present and in touch with yourself, is that, we have innate ways of getting signals from our body. We know what we need a lot of the time. A lot of time we've just kind of learned how to shut off from it, especially when our body feels threatening or emotions aren't comfortable to us or things like that. But I think a lot of what I think is important is kind of emphasizing that people can trust themselves, that a lot more than you realize, and building up that self-trust is so important, especially in your own medical care and healthcare, being able to kind of be in tune and be an active participant in your own care. I feel like nobody knows you like, you're the expert on yourself. And I kind of feel like that needs to be built up for people again.
I agree. And I think that one of the killers in there, and I use that term not lightly, is that fear. Fear stops you from doing so much. And let me take that back. I'll take the you out of there, and stops me from doing so much. And as I've gotten more in tune to speaking a little bit more publicly about what I'm doing, and the idea is that, now people are putting challenges on me to, I've now been challenged by my brother of all people to do a 365-day training. So this time, June 1st of 2025, I will run a full marathon. Wow. This is a guy who's never run a mile. Okay. So, I mean, I played football and baseball, and that's the running that I did. If somebody said, let's go jog. What's that?
And wiffle ball.
Yeah. Well, wiffle ball was very sedentary because you didn't even have to run to first base. You just had to hit the ball. But the idea that I'm going to do that is what my wife said. She goes, hey, look, if you're going to start doing this podcast, good for you. But she said, if you're going to talk the talk, you better walk the walk. And you tell people about boxing classes that you go to and all this stuff, but why aren't you there 7 days a week? And I mean, and I always have some excuse ready to go out of here. I still have a job. I mean, I still work for a living. We have to pay the rent. We're not independently wealthy. We're actually the opposite of that. And so those fears are only thoughts. And the only way they come to fruition is if I push them forward and manifest it or make something, take me out. And it's like, I was thinking about isolation, and people feel they cannot walk anymore. And then there's some point in time where the brain goes, okay, we're not walking anymore. And then they're really isolated. They're dependent upon somebody to pick them up and take them in their wheelchair. But again, it's like when you talk to somebody like Russell at the Parkinson's Wellness Fund.org, and he says, well, there's a thing called dial-a-rider. There's a thing you could, stuff that most of us don't know anything about. So you have to become a student again and learn a different life, not better or worse, although most people will tell you it's worse. Like my wife, when she said, you've been given this disease as a blessing. And I'm like, blessing, it's a blanket curse. It's a death sentence or whatever I was stupid enough to say at the time. But the idea that, we're completely abnormal or we're completely on the other side of things, and you can't learn anything new, you're just going to degenerate into a ball of whatever, is wrong.
Yeah.
I mean, but you go to these websites, and I frequent some of these Parkinson's websites, and it's like 80% people are just pissed off, and I don't blame them. Like I said in one of my things on the website, for Russell's website, as I said, I'm sure my friends would understand if I just disappeared and checked out. Now, when I said checked out, a lot of my friends took that as, is that a cry for help? Is that like saying he was considering taking his life? Not the case, but it did get a lot of responses.
Mhm.
So the point I was making is that in the end I say, but I really would like to see what tomorrow has to bring. Because wouldn't it be shitty if you jumped, or you took off on Thursday and Friday, somebody cured Parkinson's? That would really suck. That would be ironic, but it would really suck.
Well, the other
Good.
thing that was the doc was saying, not now, but on a previous conversation, was the advances that are being made in both the psychological field and the medical field are worth waiting for. And if you can just, if you just hang in there and try to learn something new every day, there is something new to be learned very frequently now. Is that right, Doc?
Well, I honestly, I would not that you should ever give up hope that more is coming, but I think kind of to Jam's point, it's kind of about being able to live with what is now. And I kind of think what's a really cool thing about what you're doing is that, I mean, Parkinson's looks so different for so many people. A lot of doctors kind of won't give a prognosis because they don't feel like they can really tell you what it's going to look like, how it's going to change, when it's going to change. And so, say, taking on, this intensive workout routine over the next year, things are going to get in the way. Things are going to shift in a positive direction and in a harder one. And being able to kind of roll with it and figure out how to kind of lean in and lean out, and leaning out not being a bad thing to do, kind of being able to respect it and kind of not letting these narratives take you off in the wrong direction or paralyze you. I mean, that's all. You can get to that place of doing, that whole routine, but what's thrown in the middle and how you get there and kind of surf through those challenging parts, it makes all the difference.
I agree. And I think a word that I've learned over the past, well, let's say I've been diagnosed since 2012. So what is that, 12 years?
Mm-hmm.
And I think I learned about 6 years into it, after 4 years of isolation, self-prescribed isolation, and figuring that my life was over, which it was not. I learned the word gratitude. And that is, people will go, oh yeah, hippy dippy, yeah, you're mindfulness and you're changing your way. And I think of many things to respond to that, but the idea that you can be grateful for the things that you have right now. I mean, we can be grateful that we're all able to speak to each other, that we're all able to speak to each other. That's two. Somebody said to me, what's a good practice? And I said, I said, I don't do this as much as I used to, but it does work. And when I need to be grounded, I ground myself in gratitude. Is just think of 5 things every day to wake up for. 5 things. That's why we rise, because there's 5 things that you could be grateful for. Your children, your parents are still here. I mean, it's funny when you put things in perspective, because well, I mean, there's another story with Vinny, but I just recently lost a friend who battled colon cancer for many years, at least a decade. We didn't even know. I mean, he was so good about, just keeping it to himself till the very end. And then we started to know, a few years ago. But the idea that I think to myself, I'm pissing and moaning about the way I feel, my neck hurts or my back hurts. And on last Sunday, including Russell, I had 4 friends run the Chattanooga, Tennessee Ironman. That's 70 miles. And I'm going, oh, my shoulders, I got a little crink. I better shut it down for the day. And it's like, I'm just grateful that those guys ran it so I could look at myself and go, you need to really step it up. Your wife is right. If you're going to walk the walk, talk the talk, you got to walk the walk. And then I think another one I wanted to ask you about, Dr. Shelby, is are you familiar with John Pepper? Wrote a book called Reverse Parkinson's. He's from South Africa.
Yeah. I haven't read his book, but a book that mentions him in it.
Yeah, Norman Deutsch's book mentions him in there, and I think he classified it as a brain that heals itself. Mm-hmm. What was interesting in some of the things, and I actually had the privilege to meet him. He came out to speak here in Los Angeles, and what was interesting was that he showed us tricks on how to deal with. He explained what the brain was doing, and all the learned behaviors were being attacked, if you will, or diminished. And he said that like most of us, when you go to pick up a glass, your hand looks like this, thumb and fingers pointing that way. If you pick up the glass, you drink it like this, or you might tweak it a little bit, exactly like Vinny's just doing demonstrationally for us. But what's interesting is he said, if you have a tremor, a really bad tremor, and I'm doing this is not my tremor, I don't have a tremor to this degree, you can't hold the wine. You spill. But it was really funny, as he said, try to pick up the glass this way. So your fingers are facing you, pick up the back of the glass and drink it this way. And what's interesting is you talked about it, and I think it's now known as fight, flight, or freeze. Mm-hmm. He said what he had learned is that put the emphasis, because you've never done it before, into the front part of the brain, which is a fight or flight, going, what the hell are we doing? I better pay attention. And all of a sudden everything falls away rather, because you're in that moment, you're picking this thing up. Or he's like, just try to do something with the left hand it's like little movements like that anybody can do just to try and see if they can get back in the game in that particular, instance.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's such even just a great example of, if you can kind of let go of those thoughts long enough that derail us, just being able to kind of observe, oh, what happens when I move my hand this way, kind of allows you to kind of change and be open to something that, when you're kind of so caught up in the worry and the stories that we tell ourselves, you kind of can't even gain those new skills or be open to them or those abilities. But I liked what you said with the gratitude and stuff. I have kind of a whole session in my course that's just about, we can make ourselves maybe pay attention. We can't really force ourselves to not be judgmental. So what are other things around mindfulness that we can support ourselves with and always be working on? And one of them is, gratitude, generosity, patience, non-striving, and even something called beginner's mind, which
I've never heard that. What is that?
So that's, when we're an expert in something or we've done it for a long time, we kind of feel, in a sense, like we know everything. We walk into it already with an idea of what to do and how to do it. And we kind of lose that thing that we have when we're a beginner, which is we're very open, we're creative, we're kind of taking in what's new, and maybe something's changed. And so being able to kind of walk into this new situation, reminding ourselves to be much more open. There's so much more we can pick up on that we kind of thought we already knew.
Excellent.
That's awesome. That is awesome. Because you know, people talk about outliers and the 10,000 hours and all that good
Yeah.
news.
Yeah.
And safe to say, I did do 10,000 hours of wiffle ball in college. And so I don't know what that gets me. But all kidding aside, I just wish people would seek out more of what you're bringing to the table, because, you know, it's not, I mean, people, I'm going to speak for myself. I'm going to speak for anybody else. I have struggled with, you know, like I'm my own roadblock. You know, how do I get out of my head? I mean, I will go kicking and streaming into June 1st, which I'm announcing it here, but I've talked to Russell about it, and we're going to probably film a bunch of it and try to, you know, feel the challenges, because, you know, people think, well, you know, he's just a happy guy. You know, he's just an optimistic guy. Not really. You know what I mean? It's like I've chosen that path because the other path is just like unbelievably bad.
Exactly.
I mean, I can go down negative channel and get my first class seat in the train and just go right to hell wherever I need to go. And the reality is that doesn't serve me, doesn't serve my wife, doesn't serve my kids, doesn't serve Vinny, doesn't serve you, Dr. Lazarow. And I think that I like, I just want to let people know that there are things that you can try, that you can deal with, and wellness is at the forefront of that, and it's all people are talking about it more and more. And when you have your pedigree, which is not, you were a life coach from, and that's not to diss on life coaches, but people are skeptical. They're like, well, it's not a medical doctor, so I'm not going to really believe that. I don't know. This guy's telling you what, if you do yoga, if you meditate, you'll do, that's poppycock. I'm going to go and deal with, you know, my 75 physicians.
Mm-hmm.
But the idea that there are these things for people with Parkinson's and other people to give you a chance to see something different.
Mm-hmm.
Because what's interesting, you said earlier, you said that Parkinson's, and I'm not going to be able to quote you, but in essence, Parkinson's is, if you met one person with Parkinson's, you've met one person with Parkinson's. No
Yes.
two people are alike.
Mm-hmm.
But where they are alike is when you go on a website and it's just like negative. You're just scrolling through, like, just my dad's doing this and my mom's doing this and my sister's doing that. And my heart breaks, because I'm like, sometimes I'll just send a little message and I'll just say, you know, have you ever tried of doing this? And the people, the actual person that asks will respond, but I don't, you know, I don't promote, because I'm afraid that it will not be taken. Like, what we're trying to offer on this website is positivity and people that are doing things a little bit differently than the mainstream has been doing for, you know, take these 2 pills and call me in the morning kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I should probably highlight, because I don't want to turn today into a lecture, but, you know, on my website, and it's mindfulhealing.health, and I have this free download that you can download, and really it's kind of I compiled a lot of research on what really got me into also mindfulness, and how stress actually affects things like how your immune system functions, longevity, gene expression, so what genes are turned on and turned off, and also how mindfulness buffers a lot of these things. So there's actually a lot of research, even, you know, brain imaging and things like that, of mindful meditators versus control groups, and how things change for them. So I would encourage people to download all that. I've kind of summarized it all, and then I've connected it to the real articles that I'm pulling them from. So I'm not going into it, but that's what's been really cool, is that I've started working with populations, specifically, honestly, working with the neurological conditions and ones that didn't have kind of, say, I worked a lot with cancer. Okay, not that it's solved, but this is our plan. We're going to move forward a lot, you know. And then I started working with Parkinson's, and it was like you're saying, you've met one person with Parkinson's, and everyone was so different. It's constantly changing. It's so challenging to identity and lifestyle and everything, that I started just bringing mindfulness in, and then finding this plethora of research of how it actually changes people's brains in the ways that they change their behaviors, how they're able to cope, you know, changes the lens in which they kind of see the world and interact with it. It's my long way of saying there's a lot of research behind it that kind of underlies my interest in the mind and the body, and then actually just watching people engage. But I would also highlight, as you're talking, and why I'm really happy that you're kind of cataloging and sharing this whole journey, that it's a lot of work too. I mean, for anyone, not even just having Parkinson's, if you want to change the way you interact with the world, the way you think, you have to practice, you have to work hard, you have to be disciplined in different ways. And I think it's kind of great that you're also shedding light on, the work it takes, but it's worthwhile.
Yeah, you bet. And especially, I love that you highlighted that the brain itself can physically change if you practice. And I think a lot of us need to do that. Some of us who've lived through tragedy or are unhappy for any number of reasons that you don't ever consider you can overcome, and you can. And getting back to being grateful, I have a support system that hopefully a lot of them are watching that I couldn't gotten through my life without. And so I'm constantly I constantly thank the Lord for that and for them being around. And I try to thank them directly when the situation, allows me to.
Yeah, and I think Vin, you touched on it brilliantly. Is that and I think so did Shelby. Is the idea that your brain has been evolving for many years. So at what point in time does Parkinson's come into it? I don't know, but there's so many other things that come into it that the brain, you could be working on your brain for this disorder, and it could be also helping this disorder that you don't, I mean, it's like people don't understand that it is, each one of us that has it is sort of I don't know what the word I'm searching for, but it's sort of like we're almost like not a student, but you would go into us and the students would study us, because each one of us is so different that the doctors will go, well, how'd you do? Oh, you can run really fast, but you can't walk. That's interesting. Why you can run and not worry about falling, but the minute you step out on the sidewalk in the middle of the evening, you think you're going to fall, or you start shuffling. And it's weird. As I've done that, I'm like, my biggest fear of doing this marathon is that I'm going to fall down. Well, the odds are I might fall down from many other things before I fall down from Parkinson's when I'm learning how to run 26.1 miles or however long it is. So I think the idea is, I think somebody said, you don't die from Parkinson's, realistically speaking. You die with Parkinson's. There's other comorbidities that come into play. And some can be, I'm sure, medically, increased or enhanced by having Parkinson's. It's a degenerative disease, and so you're on a scale. And I think your attitude, Vin, to your comment about objectivity, is a guy said this to me once in business about our business that Vinny and I both did for many years in the entertainment industry. And he said to me, what we're seeing in our society is a slow burn down to the ground. I mean, basically, he was talking about how the studios were just eliminating budget. So this year was $1 million, next year was $500,000, then it was $250,000, then it was 10,000, all the way down to $50, and then you hit rock bottom. He said the only thing that we have control over is how fast we push on the gas. So you can like burn that thing out in one move, or you can just hang on. The old book, Who Moved My Cheese, which is talking about overstaying your welcome or being there too long. And I think that is so powerful because it plays into so many different aspects of your life. Is when you realize that, hey, I'm kind of in control of where this is, not really where it's going to go, but how it's going to go, how fast it's going to go. And the more negative thoughts I have, the faster the train goes.
Right.
And so that's what was put to me, is that, and I've heard multiple people say it, we're in our line of entertainment business, we're watching the end. We're actually watching it on TV, and you know what I mean? It's like we're active participants in a viewing situation. But I think with Parkinson's, it's like only you can do for you. Your friends can only carry you so far, and the medical field can do what it can do for you. But at a certain point in time, you got to go, do I want to fight this fight, or do I want to disappear? And that's it in a nutshell. Don't disappear.
Yeah. Well, you're making me think of, I think, something we touched on in our informal podcast was
The one that never happened.
yeah, was just the idea that there's a lot of ways in which we learn to be in the world. And a lot of them come from, say, childhood. And we kind of touched on how that could look. And then you're not in that environment anymore, and it's not really adaptive. And so the way you maybe handle stress might be coming from another time where suppressing it was really adaptive for that environment to survive, say, childhood. And now it's not helpful. It's kind of flooding you with cortisol and adrenaline and, stopping your stomach from digesting every time you react that way. And sometimes when you have a diagnosis like Parkinson's, it just kind of highlights something that already was kind of dysfunctional or not actually really helpful for your body physically. And it maybe kind of forces people to come up against something that already wasn't really so healthy, but they kind of have to make the decision, is now the time to find a more adaptive way to be with, this fight, flight, freeze reaction that I always have and suppress? Or am I going to kind of keep holding on to this way of dealing with stress until my body kind of more quickly degrades?
Which is
Well,
right.
I'm gonna stop us there only because I think I could go on for another hour. I didn't even really talk that much about nutrition and your practices, but I think we would love to have you back again if we can, because I think I lose about an hour after the recording button shuts me down. I think I could be wrong, but I just want to thank you for number one, for those of you that are listening and watching. We recorded a great hour with Dr. Lazarow, and unfortunately, I forgot to push the record button. And that's a guy who's been in the entertainment business and the videotaping business for 20 some odd years, and I still forgot to push the record button. That on me. But we would love to have you back.
We love the work you do. You're focusing on neurological behavior, but it applies to everyone. And what was it? Mindfulhealing.health.
Yes.
Yeah. I encourage everybody to go to mindfulhealing.wealth. You can
Not wealth, health.
What?
You said wealth.
Health, yeah. Yeah.
Mindfulhealing.health.
Health. And I encourage everybody to go download that she was talking about, but also look at that class. I think the course that she offers, it will really jumpstart you, especially if you're looking, you really think you've tried a lot of things and you're looking for what's gonna really elevate me and get me to the next point. Dr. Lazarow's course will really, really help you. So it is mindfulhealing.health. Yeah. Also, talk about Parkinson's wellness.org, wellnessfund.org, who's our sponsor. And please visit the website and you'll see JM, a little bit of me on there. But Doc, thank you so much. I mean, I understand that this is your first podcast, and hopefully this one will broadcast. And we're really honored to have you. I'm so happy that we got to meet you, and you're really taking what we do in a nice direction. And we're just starting out. This is like our third show, and be able to apply what we talked about today going forward, and then have you come back around sometime in the future, I think will just be awesome and beneficial to our audience.
Yeah, definitely. You're both so lovely, so easy to do a podcast with and to talk to. And I really love what you're doing. There's so little resources, and especially experiential things like this. So I think it's awesome, and I'd come back anytime.
Well, thank you so much.
Be careful there.
You are why we rose today. You're the reason we rise.
I'm already seeing. Excuse me, I'm stammering. I'm already seeing. A doctor's minute where she pops on, gives us 2 minutes of something that's happening in the world, and then goes away. So yeah, what a great opportunity, as Vinny said, for us to kick it off with somebody like yourself, who is friendly and knowledgeable, and just so easy to talk to, and so specialized, but yet so general. I mean, it's not like you can only talk on this level. You can talk on all levels.
It's
and
awesome.
We're grateful for that. And to add to Vinny's point about going to the website, it's not just for people with Parkinson's. It's for caregivers. It's for friends. It's for family. It's for anybody that needs to have interaction with a person that has Parkinson's. And take it so when the opportunity comes and we reach out, that you're there to grab our hands and help us. And that's what we're grateful for always as a person with Parkinson's. So From this, we rise out, we rise well, and we will see each other on the next go round. Thank you, doctor.